everybody, and welcome to the Football Philosophy channel. And this show is about, I've mentioned it twice previously on different shows saying that I was going to do this, about a discussion that I've had on Twitter, and I've also had it with other people. People criticising some of our players, in particular Anthony Martial gets a lot of criticism for not scoring enough goals. Lots of people saying they want him to score a lot of goals, and I always say it's a team game, and it doesn't matter who scores the goals. And I've also said, and people don't want to have it, if you like. They just don't want to understand it, don't want to believe it for whatever reason. But I've said on numerous occasions that if one of our players, whichever player it might be, was to score some more goals, the likelihood is, well, nothing's absolutely certain in football, but the likelihood is they would just be goals that would replace goals that other people scored. That it wouldn't. It's okay to say, look, I wish somebody would have scored some more goals and there would have been extra goals. That's a different thing. But if you just want a certain person, if you want to say that person's got to score more goals, if that person scores more goals, it's more than likely that those goals won't add to the team goals, and it's a team game. And I'm going to explain why. And a lot of this show is not really going to be about football. It's going to be about mathematics. It's going to be about fate, the balance of probability, lady luck. All sorts of different reasons. I mean, I'm even probably, if I remember as I go through it, because I've got a few notes written down, I might even touch on time travel and the possibility of time travel. So there's lots and lots of different stuff and different reasonings as to why it wouldn't. Obviously, it's not a fact. This is it. It doesn't, but it definitely doesn't necessarily mean that your team will score more goals if one of your players starts scoring more goals. And as I say, there's numerous different reasons that I'm going to go through. I had a similar chat with a very close friend of mine who was telling me that Sergio Aguero's been missing from the City lineup, and he was saying to me that, you know, he gets, 25 goals a season on him. He gets a lot of goals, Sergio Aguero. If you've got a player who scores a lot of goals, a hell of a lot of goals like that, 25, 30 goals or more, probably your goal scoring will go up. But what we're talking about here is we're talking about a player being criticised for United, who I imagine people would probably be happy if he scores 4 or 5 more goals. If you think about it, Anthony Martial, the player, I don't want to really make this about Anthony Martial, it's about all the players. If any of the players scored more goals, I believe it would mean that some of the other players would score less goals. But since it's been aimed at Anthony Martial, just for example, Anthony Martial scored 4 goals in the league this season, and he's the one who's getting slated for it. And Marcus Rashford has scored 8 goals in the league this season, and everybody thinks it's going absolutely fantastic for Marcus Rashford. So we're talking about 4 goals here. I imagine that surely it's only fair. I know he plays at number 9, but he also plays on the left sometimes, and they both are strikers. Rashford occasionally plays at number 9 or on the right. So I imagine, it's only fair to say that if Martial had scored 8 goals, it'd be okay, and he scored 4. So I don't think the difference would make any difference to our goal scoring tally for a player who might score 4, 5, 6 or 7 goals, or hardly a difference at all. And easily, and I'm going to go through this in a minute, it could even, if one player scored some more goals, it could even cost your team goals. You could end up as a team scoring less, which I will explain. One of the I've got 5 different reasons. I'm going to read them out. I'll read them out now. I've got the first one and the most simple one, which I'm going to read, which I'm going to start with, is simply this: playing more games could get you more goals. But playing more, because obviously everybody, like Aguero, my mates mentioned Aguero, he's been out all season. Anthony Martial, he doesn't play every minute of every game. He often doesn't start. So Anthony Martial, for example, has played 1,250 minutes this season, which equates to slightly under 14 games. So there's 23 games that they've played so far, so more than 9 full games, whether he's started or come off the bench or substituted. But for the minutes on the pitch, he's not played in more than 9 of the games. And you can't expect to play every minute of every game, but you know, one of your main players, you'd expect him to play most. Like Maguire plays all the time, Bruno plays all the time, Shaw and Wan-Bissaka play all the time. So if he'd played, say, 6 or 7 more games, surely he would have scored, I don't know, maybe 2 more goals, perhaps more, but surely at least 1 or 2. I think the sensible money would be on that he would have scored 2 more goals if he'd have played 7 more games. But if he'd have scored 2 more goals in the 7 more games that he played, in those games that he played, it doesn't mean you can play with 12 men. You can only play with 11 men. So somebody else is not going to be playing. So that's the first. That is the most simplistic. That's the most simplistic way of looking at it, which is only one little issue. It's just one issue. In this case, if somebody's going to play 7 more games, say out of 9, then somebody else is going to miss those 7 games. It probably means that player is not going to score 2 goals because he's not playing. So that's the first way. That's the first thing, and that's the most simplistic way. The next thing I'm going to talk about, that was the first one. I said I'd read out the 5, didn't I? Playing more games. Number 2 is the balance of probability, which I'm going to come to next. Number 3 is fate, which I'm going to come to. Number 4 is something that I call mindset goals. And number 5 is the randomness of football. So there's 5 different things to cover. Next, the balance of probability. This is mathematics. This is the balance of probability. What's the chances of United scoring more goals? Because don't forget, the question is, if we had somebody scoring more goals, would the team score more goals? What's the balance of probability of United actually scoring some more goals? Is it fair to expect the team to score some more goals? Even if you had one more player who scored 4 more goals, is it fair to expect the team to score more goals? I've looked at the amount of goals that we've been scoring recently and what we've scored this season. We've scored 49 so far this season in 23 games. If you divide 49 by 23, 2.13, multiply that by 38, so long as we can keep going at this rate. We might not, of course. We have got 9, obviously, the other week. We've also got 6 against Leeds, so we might not continue at this rate. But this is the rate that we're going at, which would work out, if we kept at that rate, at 80.9 goals for the season. So call it 80 goals. So we are on target for 80 goals. What's the chances of us scoring more than that? In the seasons since Fergie retired, we've scored 64, 62, 49, 54, 68, 65 and 66. So in our last 2 seasons, we've scored 65 and 66. And at the moment this season, we're on target to score 80. So what's the balance of, if we change one of our players, or if one of our players played more, or if one of our players started to score more goals, what's the chances of us actually scoring many more than 80 goals when you look at the amount of goals that we normally score? So I think it's unfair to expect the players and the management. Of course, we'd love to do that. But if you look, for example, I've just looked at some fairly recent Premier League winners. Obviously, City and Liverpool in the last couple of seasons have blown it out of the water. They've been scoring 90 odd and what have you. City scored 106 one season. But they managed to find that chemistry just by us putting a different player in or giving him more games. just finding that chemistry. What they've done is somewhat special. What they've got with Salah, Firmino, the way he mixes it all up, Firmino, and they've got obviously Mane on the left, and then City, what they've been doing with Sterling and De Bruyne and David Silva, although he's just gone now, and the other Silva, Leroy Sané, all players who mixed in well and scored all different types of goals and made all different types of goals for each other. That's the team operating together, and as a team, they've scored a hell of a lot of goals. But normally, you know, that's out of the ordinary. It really is out of the ordinary. I've looked at some recent title winners. You know, when Leicester won the title a few years ago, they won the title and scored 68 goals. I think it was either the season before or the season after that. I think it was the season before. Chelsea won it with 73 goals. I've looked a bit further back to when United won it 3 times on the bounce. We won it 3 times on the bounce with 68, 80, so there's that number, 80, and 83. We won it 3 times on the bounce with an average goals per season of 77 goals. So on the balance of probability, no matter which way we mix it up, and if 1 or 2 of our players started to score a few more goals, I believe it'd be really difficult and it would be a little bit unfair to expect the team to score many more. Look, they might get 81 or 82. Is that anything to write home about? Especially if the extra goals you got, because you can't decide. It's not something that you can just decide. We're going to score the extra goals in this game, or we're going to score the extra goals in that game. You know, we scored 9 against Southampton the other week. It's about points, really. It's not like, I mean, it could, goal difference could come into it, but it's not likely to. So really, 8 of those goals are useless. You know what I mean? We beat Leeds 6-2. 3 of those goals are useless. So some of your extra goals might come when they are useless. But that is the way that goal ratios go, by the way. It's the spread of goals. Think of Liverpool. They beat Palace by 7. City beat Burnley by 6. City regularly have 4, 5 and 6 goal wins. Well, not regularly, they did years ago, and even this season they've had a few. So you can't just decide when you're going to get those goals. So on the balance of probability, I would say if United can get 80 goals, it's still a tough ask, but if they can get 80 goals, I'd say that's as many as you can expect. And you can't predict now how those goals will be spread around the team, and it doesn't matter how the goals are spread around the team in the past. On the balance of probability, United, the way they're going at the minute, could get 80. I wouldn't say should, because they're going well. They're going well. I won't say they should, but they could get 80 goals. And if they do get 80 goals, sometimes that's enough for a title-winning team. And it's certainly a lot more than we're used to scoring. You know, an average of about, 60, I worked it out before, 61 a season we've averaged for the last 7 seasons. You know, if we can get 80, our goal output would have gone up by 30% this season than on the average for the last 7 seasons. So I think on the balance of probability, so that's 2 covered. On the balance of probability, I think it's unlikely that we'd score any more goals. I think it's unfair to expect us to score any more goals. And obviously, I've already also spoken about the players might play in games and score more goals, which means somebody else isn't playing. The next one is fate. The way fate takes a hand in football and the way fate takes a hand generally in life. I'm going to talk about people doing things in games. This is about people scoring goals that they might not have scored if somebody else would have scored before them. So it's automatically, and this is what happens all the time in football, it's automatically somebody scoring a goal that then affects what happens later and prevents somebody else from scoring a goal, if that's the right word, prevent scoring away. And I'm going to mention 5 or 6 different goals that we've scored. I could do this with every single goal we've scored. With every single goal we've scored, I could say, yeah, but that happened 30 seconds earlier, which might have meant we might not have scored that goal, and it might have even cost us a goal, let alone it just swapping hands. So these are goals that have just exchanged hands, if you like. So it's a goal on somebody else's tally, it's a goal off somebody else's tally, and it's still only 1 goal to the team. So the easiest one, and you'll follow what I mean by this, the easiest one and the first one, and I'm going to build up the time difference between what happened where somebody did something that could have given us a goal, which could have cost somebody else a goal. So Everton away, Bruno chips one in for Rashford to try and head, and Rashford, it looked like he'd scored it at first, and it turned out that he didn't touch it. So this is the easiest one to cover. It's the easiest one to grasp. It was a goal. It went on Bruno's tally because Rashford didn't touch it, where it did look in the first instance that he did touch it, that he did, but he didn't. So it's a goal that would have gone on Rashford's tally. This is what we're talking about. That could have gone on Rashford's tally. So the people are saying you want him to score more goals. If Rashford would have scored that goal, i.e. touched it with his head, that would now be on his tally. And he'd be, people would be saying, right, he's got more goals. But it's one that would come off Bruno's. So that's an instant one that nobody can deny. It would have cost us Bruno's goal if Rashford would have scored it. It was instantaneous. And as I say, I'm going to talk about 6 different ones. At Brighton away, Maguire had an header goal that got handled by Neil Maupay, and I think it was Trossard on the post, headed it off the line. Obviously Trossard's on the post doing his job, but if Trossard wouldn't have headed it off the line, if he would have missed it, Maguire would have got that goal, which means United wouldn't have got a penalty, which means Bruno wouldn't have got his goal. So there's a goal again for somebody else that would have prevented, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but it certainly would have changed. It sort of changes the course of history. I'm going to come to this with fate in a minute about changing the course of history. So it changes what happens next. So if Maguire's header would have gone in instead of getting headed off the line, it would be a goal for Maguire. It wouldn't be a goal for Bruno. 2 different players' tallies are different, but the goals tally for the team is still exactly the same. More recently, only at Fulham the other week. Now I'm stretching the time differences here. The first one was a second. The next one was a penalty, which was sort of instantaneous. Against Fulham the other week, Bruno had a shot against the post and the ball went out towards the left-hand side, and we managed to win it back and cross it. And Cavani scored. So Bruno was hit the post with a shot. It's only about 15 or 16 seconds earlier. But if Bruno's shot would have gone in off the post, it's there's an inch or 2 in it. If it had gone in off the post, then we wouldn't have even restarted before Cavani got his goal. So that's another one where we still would have got 1 goal, but Cavani would have a goal less and Bruno would have a goal more if it would have gone in. The goals regularly just get swapped around. Van der Beek, sorry I'm bringing Van der Beek up, he's only got the 1 goal, but on the very first day of the season we played Crystal Palace. I've looked at it today. Mason Greenwood had a shot from the edge of the box. Whenever you have a shot, you're obviously trying to score. It doesn't matter how poor the shot is, how good the shot is. If it gets blocked instantly, it doesn't matter. This is what happens, this is fate. So Greenwood has a shot, he's trying to score, it hits the defender, it bounces out, we put the ball into the box, and it is, I timed it, it's 20, there's a couple of passes before they put it in the box. It takes 23 seconds, but 23 seconds, like I say, it just changes the situation. If Greenwood's shot would have gone in, Greenwood would have 1 more goal on his tally, Van der Beek would have a goal less on his tally, and the team would still have the same amount of goals. West Ham away. Again, a little bit longer now in between the 2 things, but it doesn't matter. This is what I'm leading to. It doesn't matter how long the difference is. It changes. Everything changes. If anything changes, everything changes, which I am going to come to. West Ham away, 76 minutes and 8 seconds. Greenwood has a run into the box and shoots into the side netting. 77 minutes and 2 seconds, which is 54 seconds later, Marcus Rashford scored. If Greenwood's shot would have gone in, it would be a goal for Greenwood, and Rashford wouldn't have scored his goal 54 seconds later. And now Everton away. 22 minutes and 40 seconds, Marcus Rashford curls a shot from the corner of the box and it goes wide and Everton get a goal kick. 24 minutes and 10 seconds, Bruno scores with a header. It's 1 minute and 30 seconds between the 2 goals. Now, this would not have been a goal for Bruno if Rashford would have scored. Same thing. But this, I'm going to go, this applies to everything, by the way, but I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into this one. A little bit deeper into it. Not only would that be a goal that Bruno wouldn't have, and Rashi would have, and it'd still be 1 goal for the team, had Rashi scored, and then a minute and a half later Bruno scored. There are other things that can happen, and this applies to every single goal, by the way. It applies to every goal. There are other things that can happen. So Rashi had a shot that went wide. Let's say that Rashi would have hit that shot a bit better and it would have been on target, because we've just said he scored. So let's say he doesn't score, but the keeper saves it and it goes for the corner. If we'd have got a corner instead of them getting a goal kick, Bruno still wouldn't have scored that goal. From that goal kick, Pickford knocks a long ball up the field, which he wouldn't be doing if it had gone for a corner instead. So he knocks a long ball upfield. I'm going to read out all the passes. Pickford kicked it long. McTominay headed it to Marshall. Marshall passed it to Bruno. Bruno to Fred. Fred to Rashford. Back to Bruno. Bruno to Fred. Fred to Rashford. Rashford to Juan Mata. Back to Rashford. Back to Juan Mata. To Luke Shaw. Luke Shaw crosses it. Bruno scores an header. None of those passes would happen. The complete thing changes in its entirety. None of those things would have happened. Whether Rashford scored, none of those things would have happened. If Rashford would have forced the keeper into a save and we would have got a corner, I'm going to come back to the possibilities there, then all of those things wouldn't have happened. And even if he would have hit the ball straight at the keeper and the keeper would have caught it, it completely changes the picture. If the keeper catches it, he's more likely to throw it out to one of his full-backs. Because it was a goal kick, he was forced into kicking it long by us marking their players. He might have threw it to one of his full-backs. He might have kicked it out of his hands. If he kicks it out of his hands, it usually goes further. It just changes the picture completely. So not just would you lose some goals by other people scoring goals, but if anything else happens differently, you can also lose goals. When I'm on the subject of it going for a corner instead, it can change so dramatically. It can change the whole picture. It can change the absolute complete picture. This is not uncommon. It's uncommon that you send all your defenders up. But when we played Başakşehir here in Turkey, everyone will remember this clearly, we had a corner and they broke away and scored from a corner. That's not uncommon for that to happen. It's uncommon for to put all the defence up. That was ridiculous what we did that day. But it's not uncommon for the teams to break away and score when the opposition have got a corner or when they've got a free kick on the edge of the box. Sometimes it's when you're in danger. Sometimes they get the ball, maybe the keeper catches it, throws it out. So if we'd have got a corner when Rashford had that shot against Everton, not only would Bruno have not got his goal a minute and a half later, but maybe Everton would have scored. So the whole picture changes. So you can't say that if something happens in a game, that the rest of whatever happens in that game is going to happen. It isn't like that. That's not how it would work. This is what you call fate. One more game I'm going to touch on before I talk about fate. We played Leeds United at Old Trafford not very long ago. We beat them 6-2. Scot McTominay now, I'm sure he doesn't dream about it, but he does hold a proud record. He's the answer to a quiz question, isn't he? He's the only Premier League player in history to have scored twice in the first 3 minutes of a Premier League game. I've watched this back today. He scored 1 goal in the 2nd minute and 1 goal in the 3rd minute. So it's just over a minute, his first goal. But before that first goal, we had already had 1 attack where we got in and around their box, or just around the D we were, and Bruno and Rashford tried to work a shooting angle between themselves and didn't manage it, and it came out of the box, and I think they even got a free kick. There was quite a lot happened in 1 minute before McTominay got his 2 goals. But all I'm pointing out about the randomness of things that happen, because I'm going to come to randomness shortly, and fate, as I'm talking about, had anything different happened, anything, but certainly a goal, well, not certainly a goal, anything, you can pass it to a different player, You can shoot over the bar or shoot wide. If anything different happens, everything changes. That's a fact. That's 100% fact. If you do anything different on a football pitch, everything else changes. It completely changes. So we're talking about goals exchanging. If Bruno or Rashford would have managed to get a shot off and score in the first minute against Leeds, McTominay would not have got his 2 goals in the first 3 minutes. And not only that, goals change games. So I'll come back to that again in a minute. It's obvious that some teams are stronger than others. Some teams are stronger at home than they are away. All different things like that. United might still have won that game. If somebody else would have scored that first goal, what definitely wouldn't have happened is we would not have scored the same goals at the same time in that game. It all would have been different. What actually happens is it resets. It's like in life. It's like fate in life. For example, your life would reset if there must be somebody out there. This is just about fate. There must be somebody out there who's won millions and millions of pounds on the lottery, who went to the paper shop to buy a pint of milk. And when he bought his pint of milk, he thought, oh, I'll have a go on the lottery. And he won millions of pounds. But he only went to buy a pint of milk because he ran out of milk. So in a way, he won millions of pounds on the lottery because he ran out of milk. Now, it may be that his wife that morning decided to have cornflakes for breakfast where she normally has a couple of slices of toast. So he's only run out of milk because his wife decided to have cornflakes that morning. So because his wife had cornflakes that morning, he's won millions of pounds on the lottery. And you can go further and further and further. Maybe his wife that weekend had had her mother staying for the weekend, and maybe her mother has cornflakes for her breakfast every day, and in case you've not gone cornflakes, she brought them with her. So if his wife wouldn't have had her mother round for the weekend, who had cornflakes for a breakfast which she brought with her, then the cornflakes were left there, you wouldn't have had cornflakes and you wouldn't have used all the milk, and your husband wouldn't have gone to the shop to buy a pint of milk and wouldn't have won millions of pounds on the lottery. And it just goes on and on and on and on. That's fate. So that's what happens on a football pitch. It's fate. If something changes, it changes everything else. Obviously a team could win. It's not impossible. When I say it resets, it's not impossible that if McTominay wouldn't have scored those goals, if Martial, it was Rashford and Bruno. If Rashford or Bruno would have got a shot off and scored in the first minute, it's not impossible that United might still have won 6-2 that day. But the game just resets itself. If everything starts again, so it resets. So United are probably, I'm not going to say they're a better team. Okay, United are a better team than Leeds. They might have won 2-1, they might have won 4-2, they might have won 6-2. But if they did win 6-2, it's got nothing to do with the fact that we beat them 6-2 anyway. Nothing to do with it whatsoever. If something else happens that's different, from that moment it resets. So if United take the lead 1-0, and it's a different goal scorer at a different moment, then everything else changes completely, and you just do not know what is going to happen for the rest of that game. It changes. Now United 1-0 up at home to Leeds, you would expect they would go on to win, but we were 2-0 up against Everton the other day and drew 3-3. So you just don't know really. You expect it, but you don't know. We got beat at home by Sheffield United. 2-1 was it? We got beat 2-1 by Sheffield United. If we can lose to Sheffield United, we can lose to Leeds, even from a winning position. We might have drew that game if somebody else would have scored in the first minute. It just changes. If anyone's familiar with the film Back to the Future, which I used to love when I was a young man, really, when that was out. If anything changes, if you could go back in time, if there was time travel was possible, anything that you do back in time changes, as they say in that film. I know it's only a kiddies film, really, but it's still true. If you can go back in time and you do something different and you change, I think they call it the equilibrium, then the future changes. The smallest of changes can make just untold differences in the future, and that applies in a football match. So if you've got somebody who you want to score more goals, if he had have scored more goals, it might have changed your games, and it's even possible that they could have changed those games in a negative manner. That's possible. So that's fate. Somebody scoring goals at a certain time, as I've shown with the ones that are only seconds before. Those ones that are seconds before, you must appreciate that is a rock solid fact. If it's seconds before, then the other thing doesn't happen. Some of them goals I've read out, they haven't even restarted the game at the moment. At the moment Cavani scores at Fulham, if Bruno's shot that hit the post would have gone in, they still would have been celebrating. The game wouldn't have even restarted yet by the time Cavani scored. So then the game resets from that moment. We might have gone on, if Bruno would have hit the post, we might have gone on to win 4-1, or we might have drew 2-2. It just resets. It all starts from that moment. It's all brand new, and the future is changed if you change something. That's a fact. It is 100% fact. If you change something, it changes the future. So as much as we like to think, we would beat Leeds, we beat Leeds 6-2. If it didn't go like it did, then it can change. Obviously, we expect to beat them. We're a better team. But we've also lost to Sheffield United. So it could, if something different happens, the whole thing is different. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is something that I call mindset goals. Because we're talking about here, let's get back to the beginning. We're talking about the fact that people seem to think that if somebody would have scored some more goals, that the team would have scored some more goals. And I've already shown 2 different reasons why that isn't the case. Not might be, but it isn't the case. It could happen, but it's just different things that happen. But it's not likely to happen. Mindset goals. There's no truer saying than goals change games. So we're talking here about the team scoring more goals, aren't we? So my first example of mindset goals was away at Southampton. We were 2-0 down at Southampton and came out with renewed vigour, and a substitute was made, so that makes a difference. Cavani came on and we ended up winning 3-2. So if we'd not been 2-0 down at half time, would we have scored 3 goals? Because all we're talking about here is the team scoring more goals. If that game would have been 0-0 at half time, we might not have come out with renewed vigour. We might not have put Cavani on at half time. We might have thought, it's going all right. This is what our managers think. It's going okay. It's 0-0. We've had a couple of decent chances. We'll get another one soon. So if it's 0-0 at half time, maybe he doesn't make those changes, and maybe we wouldn't be pushing for 3 goals. We scored 3 goals basically because we needed to score 3 goals. So let's take that a step further. If one of our players, say Anthony Marshall, would have scored in the first half before they scored, the whole game changes. Not only does it change fate-wise, but mindset-wise it changes. United take the lead 1-0, so because like you're saying, you want, or people are saying, they want somebody to score more goals. You don't know when these goals are going to come. So say he scores in the first, I don't know when Southampton scored, but say he scores before they score, 15 minutes into the game. 15 minutes into the game, United are 1-0 up. They take the foot off the gas, they keep hold of the ball, they just try and prevent them getting in the game. You might go in at half time 1-0 up and you might hang on to that game, or you might just get one more. You're not going to be pushing and pushing to get 3. We pushed and pushed to get 3 because we were 2-0 down and we wanted to win. So it's a mindset, that's your mindset. So if somebody would have scored a goal in the first half against Southampton, we might not have scored 3 goals against Southampton. And if you think that's far-fetched, it really isn't. We played Southampton not long before that, a few months before that at Old Trafford, and we were 2-1 down. So, we didn't score 3 goals in that game from being, 2-1 up. We didn't score 3 goals in that game from being 2-1 up because we didn't need to. We didn't have the mindset to push on and really go for it. And what happened to us in that game? Southampton equalised. We drew 2-2. So we drew 2-2 and we were 2-1 up in that game. But then when we played them away, we're 2-0 down. When we're 2-0 down, we've really got to go for it. So that's what I call mindset goals. We've had lots of games this season where we've been behind in games. We've won lots of games from being behind. So whenever you're behind, you've got to score 2. So they're trying to win these games. So if we'd have scored some of these, if we'd have gone in front in some of them games, we might not have scored 2 in them games. We might have scored 1. Your mindset is different. Goals change games. And then some of the games just on about mindset goals. And this is something that people just won't want. Obviously, when you think, I wish you would have scored, you know, we've drawn, let's look at some of the big games, the tougher games. We've drawn 0-0 with City, we've drawn 0-0 with Chelsea, and we've drawn 0-0 with Liverpool. Obviously, they're some of the tougher games on the fixture list. And they will have a different mindset if you score first. If you score first against City, especially if it's an early goal, they've got plenty of time to get back in it, and their mindset might change, and their manager might make some changes. If you score first against City and it's in the first 20 minutes, you might end up losing the game. They change their mindset, and you might change 1 or 2 players, and it can just change. So there's no point in thinking, if we score, you know, as a fan, you can go, I wish such and such a body was scoring more goals. I wish he would have scored against City. It'd be pretty handy if he scored in the last 5 minutes against City. That would be right handy, or in injury time. That'd be fantastic. But if you could turn the clock back and go and play City against someone and say, right, we'll start again. If we scored in the first 5 minutes, we might end up getting beat. So it's not just about I wish we would score some goals. It could feasibly have a negative effect. It could have a negative effect on the amount of goals you score and on the points you get. So it's not that, it isn't that it's not that straightforward. It's not that straightforward of just saying, if somebody scores some more goals, the team will score some more goals. Randomness I wanted to talk about. When I spoke about fate, and if somebody scores a goal, it changes everything. The tiniest little thing can change everything. I don't know if anybody's heard, have you heard the, I don't know if it's a fact, but I've read it in numerous places, and it absolutely astonishes me, and I find it hard to believe, that there are more stars in the solar system than there are grains of sand on the earth. And that, I was about to say fact. I don't know it to be a fact, but I've read it often enough that I tend to start thinking that there's some credibility behind it. Imagine just 1 handful of sand. Imagine how many millions of grains of sand there is in 1 handful. And I've read in numerous places, Google it, I'm sure you'll see it, there's more stars in the solar system than there are grains of sand on the earth. It blows my mind. I just honestly cannot believe it. So, here's something else. Back to football. The randomness of passing patterns. I've just drawn that. Hundreds and hundreds of passes in a game going in all different directions. Sometimes you're giving the ball away. They're all in the same colour. It doesn't matter which team's passing it to who. Hundreds of passes in the same game. Passing patterns. That is randomness. As much as the players are trying to pass it to their own players, nobody can decide that when it's going to get given away, when somebody's going to intercept it, when somebody's going to mess up. The reason I mentioned the grains of sand and the stars in the sky, if that was the passing, well, obviously that's just made up, by the way. I've not found a game and found the passing patterns from a game. That's just made up. They're just random lines on a piece of paper. But if all those random lines on a piece of paper is the passing pattern from one given game, I believe that there are more different passing patterns that could possibly happen than there are grains of sand on the earth. I believe there are an infinite amount of passing patterns on a football pitch. Absolutely infinite, impossible to count the amount of different, if that was the passes of a game that took place in any given game, and you could map the passing pattern of every single game that ever took place, obviously they'd all be completely different and it would never end. It's a never-ending, different passing pattern. So that's randomness. So why do I mention randomness when it comes to passing patterns? When I'm discussing with people or arguing with people about the fact that somebody scoring some more goals for your team doesn't necessarily mean that your team will score more goals. And that's a fact, by the way. It doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying it could happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will happen. That bit is a fact. Somebody scores 2 more goals in a game than what you've already scored already. If you play the game in the past and somebody else, because we're talking about what's being spoken about is somebody should have scored more goals. We're talking about the past. So if somebody should have scored more goals, he might have scored a goal in the game against Leeds, for example, earlier in that game, which might have prevented United from scoring 6 goals because it changes. So the reason I'm mentioning randomness is it's not just the goals that can change things. A single pass in a single match can change things. I know that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about goals changing games. I'm trying to stress the point. And the point is, if that was the passing pattern from a certain game, and when you kick off, if your striker who kicks off passes the ball, say, back to his left centre back, and then this is the passing pattern from that game, if instead, from the very first kick of the ball, he decided to pass it to his right centre back, that whole passing pattern will be completely different. If he passed it to his left centre back and the game finished 3-1 to you, if he passed it to his right centre back instead, you might have got beat 3-1. You've got to try and get it into your mind that you're talking about teams that are evenly matched. There's no point saying United are playing a non-league team in the FA Cup, so it wouldn't have changed it. I don't mean it like that. I'm talking about when there's any relevance, when there's any, when the teams are relevant to each other that have a similar standing. So if 2 teams of a similar standing are playing each other, if something changes, everything changes. Don't get me wrong, everything changes even if one of the teams is a massive underdog. If it's a massive underdog, that pass when you start or a goal that you score, it might mean you win 8-0 instead of you winning 6-0. So it still changes, but it's just not as relevant. So if this is a serious game between 2 serious clubs, when you kick off, if this is the passing pattern from a game, if you kick it to your left centre back, that game might mean that game might end in a 3-1 victory for your team. If you'd have passed it to your right centre back instead, the whole passing pattern, because then he passes it to somebody different, and the whole passing pattern for the whole game is completely different. So simply from that single pass from the kickoff, that sort of decides the future. You could lose 3-1 or you could win 3-1 or even worse or even better, depending on where you kick it to right from the very first instance. So because of that, and that's a fact, it's an absolute fact, it just changes. The ball goes to a different place, it then goes to another different place, and then to another different, and so on and so forth. A little bit like, that's why I read out all the names from the Everton game, when the keeper kicked it long and McTominay headed it to Marshall, and Marshall passed it to McTominay and then to Fred and so on, and there was about 12 passes. If Everton wouldn't have had a goal kick, if United would have got a corner instead, none of those passes would have happened. If you had a passing pattern from that game, those passes are all on that passing pattern sheet. But if that would have gone, if the keeper would have saved it, if it had gone for a corner, or if the keeper would have caught it, none of those passes will be on that passing pattern. It changes absolutely completely. So you don't know. The randomness of that means that could change the score. It will change the result of the game. United won that game 3-1. They might have gone on to win it 3-1, of course they might, but if they did, it would be through different goals, and it'd be absolutely nothing to do with the fact that they won it 3-1 on that day anyway. The game just, once it changes, once it's a different kickoff, or once somebody scores, which is the main point, Once somebody scores, that's the point of this randomness. If something changes, even a pass, let alone a goal, it changes everything, absolutely everything. We've done randomness, we've done playing more, it means that another player is going to play less. We've done the balance of probability. You're only going to score so many goals. The most team that anyone's ever scored in the Premier League is 106. It looks like if we keep going as we are, that we're going to get 80. So the balance of probability means we're probably not likely to score any more goals anyway, whoever scores them. Fate and also mindset. So we've covered those 5 things. Having covered those things, that if we could turn the clock back, I've written a little letter out here for Anthony Marshall. If he could turn the clock back and play if we could turn the clock back and play the whole season again, right, okay, let's do that. But whatever you do, don't score in the first half at Southampton. Whatever you do, don't do that. If you get a chance against Leeds at Old Trafford in the first minute, miss it. Whatever you do, miss it. Oh, and against City, just in case they come back and beat us, only score if there's at least an hour gone. We don't want you scoring in the first hour against City. It might upset them and we might end up not getting the point that we've already got. In fact, when I think about it, Anthony, in all the games that we ended up winning, don't score in any of them. We'll settle for that. It might change it. So any of the games that we won, don't score it. Don't score in it. And in fact, we'll settle for the ones that we drew as well, you know what I mean? Because we might lose them. So any of the games that we got points in, don't score in them. So that leaves 4 games. In them 4 games, we lost to Spurs, we lost to Palace, we lost to Arsenal, we lost to Sheffield United. If you can score in any of them games, do that. Just score in them. And that opens up another can of worms, because the Palace game that we lost was the very first game of the season. And this is fate and randomness. If we would have won that game, if Anthony Marshall would have scored in that game, most fans will just go, that means we've got 3 more points. If anybody would have scored in that game early on and we would have gone on to win that game, people will just say, right, that's that game won. So that's an extra 3 points on the board. Fate doesn't decree that. That does not work like that. If we'd have won that game, we've no idea how we didn't win it, so we've no idea how we would have won it. We've no idea who would have scored the goals. We've no idea if it would have led to somebody getting injured, because the whole thing changes. Somebody could have got. If that game changes, somebody might have got a serious injury. Somebody might have scored 2 or 3 goals that kept his place in the team for the next couple of games, and it can just change your whole season. So as much as you like to think we'd have won that if we'd have won that first game against Palace, it's easily possible that changes everything going forward, and we might actually end up with less points now than what we have got. I know that's difficult to swallow, but it just does change. It's like I've spoken about, it's like Back to the Future. It changes the equilibrium. Everything else changes if something changes. So if we'd have beaten Palace on the first game of the season instead of losing that game, it doesn't automatically mean that we would have an extra 3 points. That only counts in the last game that you played. Anything before that, you can't say that. So the last game that we played Everton and we drew. So if we'd have won that game, we would have an extra 2 points. But anything before that, what happened in that game can have an effect going forward. So it doesn't work like that. That's fate, randomness, mindset goals, people taking the place of other people in the team, and whatever the other one was. So I hope you've enjoyed that show. If you've enjoyed it, please tell all your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, if you think it's a little bit too deep, too much over your head, you don't want to accept it, most of it's facts, what I'm telling you about. Some of it's opinion, but most of it is facts. If you don't want to accept it, don't tell anyone. Keep stum.